Now that we can all understand each other, let me say welcome once again. We really appreciate that all of you took the time to join us here today. As you probably know by now, we're only 1 month away from the UN Climate Conference in Belém. Over the course of 2 weeks, over 50,000 delegates will come together at COP30. The Franciscans will be among them to push our leaders to take strong and meaningful climate action. In our previous 2 webinars, we've done our best to explain how these conferences work and what issues we'll raise at COP30. If you missed these conversations, they're available on YouTube, and we'll put a link in the chat later on. During this call, we'd love to hear from you as well. And if you have any questions to our panelists, you can use the Q&A function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, to send us questions, and we'll try to weave them into the conversation. Today, we will zoom in on the leading role that communities of faith are taking on the issue of climate change, starting with a call to action by the Catholic Bishops' Conferences of the Global South. And in order to do so, we have a great panel lined up for you today. We're joined by Brother Joseph Rozansky, who spent 10 years in Brazil and another 10 years as the director of the international JPIC offices of the Friars Minors. We also have Brother Rodrigo Perret, a Franciscan friar from Brazil, where he works closely with communities affected by extractive industries. He's a veteran of several previous COPs, and he's closely involved in organizing the People's Summit that will run alongside COP30. We also have Sister Charity Nkandu. She is the Vice Director of the Mission Secretariat of the Franciscan Missionary Sisters in Assisi and a board member of Franciscans International. Originally from Zambia, she has also worked on various projects supporting vulnerable children and physically challenged young women. We're also joined by Renata Bullos, the Executive Coordinator of Brazilian Action to Combat Inequality. And you'll forgive me if I don't try to pronounce that in Portuguese. Last but not least, we have Brother Christopher John, the Minister General of the Anglican Society of St. Francis, also a board member of Franciscans International. And he's currently calling in from the Solomon Islands, where the brothers support communities affected by industrial logging. And finally, my name is Thomas Kleinveld, and I'm the Communications Officer for Franciscans International. So the starting point of our discussion today is the call for climate justice and the common home by the bishops' conferences from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean on the occasion of COP30. Joe, for those unfamiliar, can you help us situate this document? How did it come to be, and what are some of the key points being raised in it?
Okay, I believe that everyone has received a copy of the document. I'm not sure if you've been able to read it. So I'm going to give some of the content from that document and where it came from. On June 12th of this year, the Catholic Churches of the Global South released the document that you have received called A Call for Climate Justice and the Common Home: Ecological Conversion, Transformation, and Resistance to False Solutions. It is the fruit of the collective discernment of the churches in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean as they prepared for COP30. It is a demand for a radical economic and societal transformation that prioritizes well-being and ecological integrity over profit, urging a just energy transition, the rejection of fossil fuels and false solutions, and a commitment to climate justice by uplifting the most vulnerable communities globally. The call emphasizes that there is no climate justice without ecological conversion and resistance to corporate-driven green capitalism that deepens inequalities. The document notes it is inspired by Laudato Si', the encyclical of Pope Francis, and by the call of Pope Leo to live integral ecology with justice. As such, it is a call for profound ecological conversion. As it celebrates the 10th anniversary of both Laudato Si and the Paris Agreement, it notes that the countries of the world have not responded with the necessary urgency and declares that the Church will not remain silent. This document is especially important to us of the Franciscan family as it aligns very closely with our charism and highlights many of the same issues that we have been promoting for years. Between 10 and 20 years ago, the JPIC movement of the Franciscan family became increasingly aware that it was impossible for individual countries to face the power of multinational actors. Because of this insight, we began to look for ways to bring together various countries facing the same issues in a common struggle for justice. One area in which this approach has been successful is that of mining. It seems to me that the document coming from the Global South for COP30 takes a similar kind of approach. It brings together the voices of many countries and regions of the world, and in this way, it provides much greater leverage in addressing the urgent problems of climate justice and care for our common home. As we look at the document, we can ask, what are its key demands? The document says that science is clear. We must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade to avoid catastrophic effects. The signers write that we must never abandon this goal, and further note that it is the Global South and future generations who are already suffering the consequences of the current situation. So what are some of the further key themes and demands? They include climate justice for the vulnerable. The call highlights that climate change disproportionately harms poor and marginalized communities who are least responsible for the crisis. Solutions must prioritize their needs over corporate interests. There is also the demand of a rejection of false solutions. The document condemns green capitalism, mining, and energy monoculture as schemes that sacrifice communities and ecosystems for profit. Another theme is that of ecological conversion. There's a strong link between environmental justice and a deep societal, spiritual, and economic transformation called ecological conversion. Those from outside the church community are probably not very aware of the calls from the church since the time of John Paul II for ecological conversion. Another theme is the phasing out of fossil fuels. A central demand is the elimination of all fossil fuel exploration, exploitation, and infrastructure to align with the 1.5 degrees centigrade climate target. Another theme is radical economic transformation. The call advocates for an economic paradigm shift that favors the conditions for life on Earth, promoting solidarity, social justice, and cooperation over exploitation. The document also speaks about protecting indigenous and traditional communities. The call defends the sovereignty of these communities over their territories, recognizing their vital role in ecosystem protection and promoting local strategies for food security and water. The document also speaks of accountability and monitoring. The document proposes the creation of an ecclesial observatory to monitor COP commitments and hold governments accountable for fulfilling their climate action promises. Once again, it is important to recognize that the key demands of this document highlight many of the issues for which the Franciscan family has been advocating for many years now, and they reflect the work of Franciscans International at the UN and throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Rodrigo, so the call by the bishops was released specifically on the occasion of COP30, and some of its demands touch on very specific policy issues. As someone who will be there at the climate conference in Belém, and as someone who's been to more of these COPs, could you talk a little bit about how does this document relate to the UN climate conference, and how can we use it to influence the outcome of COP30?
Thank you, Thomas. I would say that starting my reflection saying that this document, of course, is an ethical, spiritual, religious, and prophetic document from the Church in the Global South, and in a process of discussions and trying to see the as Father Rosansky just told us, in terms of how are the responses from the Global South for the climate crisis, for the different crises that are that intertwine among them and make worse the situation where we are living, and what would be the solutions. So the text from the call of the Catholic from the Global South, I think if we could see from the perspective of 5 negotiation outcomes that could shape as solutions, but they are extremely connected to global finance. So here we have the role of the document, and that goes towards a different paradigm of what COP30 and the climate transition should be. So the Catholic Global South call not only critiques, but also points towards an alternative direction for each of these 5 negotiation fronts. And I would say one is COP30 as a financial milestone versus COP30 as a systemic milestone. And it's interesting, there is a document from the United Nations Environmental Program view on these 5 topics. So COP, for them, it's a turning point for reshaping global finance, integrating climate goals into markets. We could say, reading the Global South, Catholic Global South document, there's a critique, because this vision keeps the same capitalist system that caused the crisis, merely greening it. So it somehow points to an alternative direction. COP30 should not be about greening finance, but about transforming the economic system from an extractivist and profit-driven to life-centered, community-led, and post-extractivist. When you say post-extractivist, we're not saying no extraction, but extraction is not the core of the system, But the core of the system is our lifestyle and how can we survive in this planet within the nature. So it's not finance that must be reformed, but the logic of accumulation itself. Pope Francis in Laudato Si talks about happy sobriety, change style of life. The other is climate action as an economic opportunity versus climate action as social ecological justice. Because in this issue of adaptation, then climate action become an economic opportunity, adaptation. So climate action, the way it's framed as a profitable and technologically inevitable. So the transitions and the solutions, they are more economic than ethics. And this is something that we need to stress, you know. So the critique is this turns climate action into another market opportunity, reinforcing inequality and extractivism in the global south through green technologies and new resources frontiers. Oh, it means let's get the case of the EVs, the electric vehicles, or the transition for digital technologies, more mining, more rare earth extraction. So, which would be the alternative direction? The Global South document proposes climate justice, not climate markets, placing people's rights sovereignty and sufficiency economies, agroecology, community energy, degrowth at the center, non-profit and consumption. The other one is finance as the driver of transition versus peoples and territories as the drivers of transformation. So the tendency of the negotiations are banks and investors are the key actors. Public policy must make their investments viable. The critique of the document. This prioritizes private profit and financial power over public interests, excluding grassroots leadership and a multilateralism that comes from bottom to top, even though we are living in a world where the institutions of the multilateralism that was born after the Second World War are under threat. But we need to remember, like Pope Francis said at Laudato Deum, that we need to strengthen for a multilateralism that comes from bottom to the top. So the alternative direction of the call for territorial democracy, energy, land, and food transitions led by communities, indigenous peoples, and workers, financed through public and cooperative means, not speculative markets. So, those 5 negotiation fronts, each of these challenge and redirect from the document on a system view. So if we think on to reduce the emissions, so the critique is reduces climate policy to market logic, make the South plans dependent on private investment. The alternative, the so-called NDCs, should reflect the sovereignty, the community-defined pathways, and the rooted. So, just to make short of the reflection, the document brings a different view and different proposals and alternatives that come in from a more broader dialogue and conversation among us, not the document not refuse the urgency, but critiques adaptation and and the climate finance that is all based in give money to those who can't adapt to the climate changes, and then we need money to buy those technologies, more dependence. The South continues. So to sustain the global North. So the TSF vision reframes the global South reframes vision from COP30 from a space for green financial reform to a space for social ecological transformation. It exposes the green capitalism masks colonial continuities and offers instead a post-extractive, decolonial, and life-centered alternative, a call to move from transition to transformation.
Thank you very much. You touched on the North-South division there, and we actually got a question from Bian as well about what kind of support the churches in the Global South have received from their counterparts in the Global North. And that brings me to Sister Charity, because one of the things that sets this document apart is that it comes specifically from the Global South. Sister Charity, I wanted to ask you, why is it meaningful that there's a unified call of action coming from this part of the world?
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, it is profoundly meaningful that this call rises with one voice from the Global South, because unity gives soul to our struggle and witness to our hope. For too long, our lands have been plundered, our air, water poisoned, and our people made to suffer for a crisis we did not create. We have contributed the least to climate change, yet we bear its greatest wounds. And when we speak together, we speak not only as nations, but as stewards of creation and guardians of the poor. Our unity is more than a political statement, it is a spiritual act of healing. It proclaims that the same God who entrusted creation to our care still calls us to protect it with courage and with love. This shared voice from the Global South is both a cry and a hymn, a cry for justice and repentance, and a hymn of hope that a new relationship with the earth and with one another is still a possible one rooted in reverence, equity, and care for our common home that we are talking about. It is the Global South standing up to say, we are not victims of history. We are stewards of creation. Our unified voice proclaims that the solutions to the climate crisis will not come from those who caused it, but from those who have long lived closest to the earth, who know her rhythms, her pain, and yet also her sacredness. This unity is a sign of hope for us. It tells the world that the time for pity has passed. The time for partnership, justice, and shared responsibility has come. When the Global South speaks together, we speak not only for ourselves, but for the healing of our common home, as I earlier said. So when we look at the historical and structural injustices that underline this call, we are saying that there are several injustices that have shaped the present situation. First, colonial exploitation of our resources have been taken away for centuries, and our people have really benefited from it. Secondly, investor dominance. Foreign companies come in the name of development, but they destroy the land and water and leave communities poorer than before in the name of investment. Third, the labor inequity. Our young people do the hardest jobs, for the lowest pay while the profits flow elsewhere. I'm sure we all know where. And fourthly, environmental degradation. The extractive industries cause soil erosion, deforestation, and pollution, but there are no serious efforts to restore Mother Earth. Finally, industrial pollution. Those who are poor suffer the most when the water is polluted or when the air is unclean, because they have no means to correct this damage. All these are expressions of financial and ecological injustice that continue to widen the gap between the North and the South. But one would ask, how is this connected to climate justice? It is not only about reducing emissions, but also about righting the wrongs of history. Those who have caused the crisis must take greater responsibility. The global North must support the South in building resilience and sustainable livelihoods. The imbalance between us is moral as well as financial. The global North must hear our cry, not as a plea for charity, but as a call for justice and solidarity. We all live on the same planet, and when one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers. And from my personal perspective as a Franciscan missionary sister of Assisi from Zambia, I believe that the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor are one. Saint Francis of Assisi taught us that creation is our brother and sister, brother sun, sister water, mother earth. When the earth is wounded, we too are equally wounded. In Zambia and across the global South, we see how climate change affects the poorest, first and foremost, the small farmer, the mother who walks long distances for water, the child who cannot go to school because of drought or floods. This is why I feel so strongly that our voices must be heard and must be heard as one. Our call is not against anyone. It is for everyone, because it is global. It is a call for conversion of heart, for shared responsibility, and for love that restores creation. That, for me, is what true climate justice looks like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Charity, for sharing. Up till now, we've focused on the call coming from the Catholic bishops, but of course, the Catholic Church is not alone in calling for the preservation of our common home. That's why I'd like to turn to Brother Chris for a moment. We've been working together in places like the Pacific on environmental issues. And Chris, could you share with us some of the initiatives that are coming from the Anglican Church?
Yes, very happy to be here. Zoom has just popped a thing up on my screen saying internet connection is unstable. So we're praying I can get through 5 minutes. Actually, we're, you know, what Sister Charity was talking about became very pointed for me. We were in a meeting a few years ago here with a government representative.
I'm afraid we might have lost Brother Chris. I think so. Let's hope that we get him back and then we'll get back to him. For now, I wanted to touch upon something else. We've heard a bit from Rodrigo about how these calls can resonate at COP30. But I'm also wondering about the grassroots. Maybe to start with Renata, you're one of the people here that works with affected communities every day. In your experience as an activist, as a human rights defender, How can these calls and initiatives help invigorate action and really make a difference on the ground?
Thank you, Thomas. Well, first, I'm here also representing the homeless workers movement. Homeless workers movement has been for 28 years approximately struggling, and nowadays it's one of the largest social movements in Brazil. When I think you're mentioning about grassroots, we have to consider that Brazil is the poorer half of the population has less than 1% of the national wealth. So what we struggle as a homeless workers movement is for social rights, decent housing, food security. So how do we do that? We have today 26 occupations in almost 60 solidarity kitchens spread all around the country in 16 states. So mobilizing and organizing those who are the most affected people, more than about, I think, 50,000 low-income families, to not only achieve apartments, we have already gotten more than 12,000 apartments, but to live an intensify transforming experience that will lead them to fight collectively for equal rights. So in these occupations, we offer activities such as course, debates, legal and psychological support, cultural events for children, adults, youth. But Joseph was talking now about climate justice, and the truth is that we represent here those who have not contributed to the environmental chaos we have been going through, but we are among the most affected ones. So we are workers from popular economy, informal workers, street vendors, seamstresses, Uber drivers, who put a lot of effort to be able to feed their family when they can. And their family mostly are Black, poor women living in the peripheries who have long journeys of exhausting work in exchange of very low income, usually not regulated. So we struggle every day with our own hands for a different model that includes us, fight all kinds of inequalities, because we're talking about COP, about inequality, but inequalities are social, gender, racial inequality, and there's no way to talk about environmental inequalities or think of an ecological shift without approaching all of that. So we thought, how do we change that? Well, in practice with our own hands, when we built the kitchens, it's one of the way we found more than feeding people that I wanted to remember that mostly during COVID breakdown and all of that, we had more, at least 1/3 of the population were in food security here in Brazil. So more than feeding people with health food, creating community gardens, we made the kitchen spaces to implement social technology in the territory. So we create community plans to prevent risks, to talk about environmental racism, and creating solutions from below, because that's what we believe. Well, not to mention, we had also the emergency kitchens that we usually build in places facing floods, drought, and other consequences of global warming. In Rio Grande do Sul, floods last year, we fed more than 1,000 people per day with our voluntary work and a lot of hard work. So it's our go-to in the Cúpula dos Povos, the People Summit. We'll be serving the food from our community kitchens there, from our kitchens and all of that. And another way we struggle is through the demand of urban reform. It's not only in São Paulo, but all big cities all around the country have empty places in the city center, controlled by real estate speculation. So while the rich people are staying in the center, the poor people are being thrown to the peripheries. So we fight for decent housing with decent infrastructure, with public policies. So how can we live in the peripheries, in places, risky areas where get flooded, where there's no sewage and a lot of that, without the decent transportations to come to work, to take our kids? So when we talk about climate justice, we're also talking about that. We're talking about where those people who have no money are living, what are they facing every day in their lives to be able to work, to be able to be fed, to be able to feed their families. It's not because they do not live in the forest that they are not being affected by that every single day. So in that regard, we have been working with the National Secretary of Peripheries to create these participatory plans, because we believe here, and I listen to your experiences and what we've been talking about the Franciscan view and Laudato Si, how we are connected in all of that. But for us, our main challenge is to place the urban on the debate, because the urban context is not only the problem. We believe the solution must go through the urban. There is no way to conceive any environmental solution without the peripheries, without the people living in the peripheries. From people who live in a daily basis the effects of global warming and inequality, we want to say that it's not about hearing us and making their own decisions of allegedly green capitalism inside the summit that we will not even be admitted to. It's not about listening to us and pretend they agree with a beautiful speech about changing and shifting to a new model. We believe that the poor people, the Black people, of course, the urban and the people living in the forest, we are the most affected ones. But the solution must include our work, our solutions, and our voices from below. We cannot only be heard. Our solutions must be part of the global solution. That's it.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I think that's a very good reminder that this is a collective effort that really has to include everyone. And I see that we have Brother Chris back with us. So, speaking about inclusion, Chris, would you like to elaborate a bit more about what you started about the initiatives from the Anglican Church?
Thanks. I hope we can get through my slot okay this time with the internet. As I was saying, from a local perspective in Solomon Islands, the small nation that we have been challenging the government about logging and human rights, and the government has come back to us and other advocates and said, what are you doing about climate change? In a small nation, we feel the effects of what the big nations around us in the Pacific and wider area are doing. So Anglicans generally, things work a little bit differently. We don't have a pope. We have more of a structure which is a communion of national churches, and we have a number of kind of internationally agreed things now. And an important starting point is one of our marks of mission. We set out some years ago to say, what do Anglicans mean by mission and so on? Well, one of them is they added later on this mark to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth. So kind of everything else has been flowing from that. The Lambeth Conference in 2022, the gathering of all the Anglican bishops around the world, had a strong emphasis on a number of environmental issues. It also included a launch of an initiative called the Communion Forest. And this is kind of an encouragement, but also a sort of a structure and a way of sharing information encouragement for all the different units, parishes and schools and religious orders and so on, to do something about planting trees or caring for the trees you have. Not necessarily trees, of course. Each environment has whatever grows best in it. It may be some grass, it may be mangroves, it may be restoring mangroves that have been cut down, whatever. And so that has begun to happen around the place. And one of the things I think about it is trying to link spirituality with what we do with growing trees, but ecosystem restoration generally. And this is a challenge. I was looking on some social media comments just a few hours ago, and some were along the lines of, why are you worrying about climate change when we're all going to go to hell if we don't repent? Hell is going to be much warmer than just a few degrees. So, you know, we have these a range, a diversity of opinions, and yet, you know, these important matters about climate, environment are really there at the heart. And so they come from these fairly widely agreed statements and positions, and then a lot of local action. And what we've been trying to do really is to sort of share the news of what's happening locally. Bishops who would give saplings or seeds to confirmation candidates, for example, to encourage things like planting of trees on significant days. We have a grassroots movement in Southern Africa called Green Anglicans, which has spread through 15 African countries with action at the levels of spirituality, local action, and advocacy. And more recently, we have begun to work in trying to create the season of creation, which has kind of caught on ecumenically. And of course, we have just finished that season of creation running from the beginning of September through to St. Francis Day. I think one of the challenges for me I see in that season of creation is that being good church people, we hear the word season, so therefore we think, that means some special prayers we've got to have. Well, that's all good. But you know, I think it needs to be not just, we're going to have creation-focused prayers for this month, or we're going to put a picture of a tree up somewhere. It does need to be one of action as well, and of really creatively and in a very deep way examining what we do and what we could do differently. That's the whole point of the season. It's not just to get the book down from the shelf with the prayers you have for this month, and then when you're finished, put it back up there afterwards. And I think that's a bit of a challenge for us. And coming to the local, the very specific areas that I know best about of what do Anglican Franciscans do. We are very small. We have our third order are like the secular Franciscans, and our first order brothers and sisters and Franciscan sisters and so on. But we are small. But we are doing some stuff. So, for example, one of our friaries in England, in Dorset in the southwest, in a way reinvented itself. The purpose of the friary is a community based around sustainable living in a very holistic way. It's not just lip service. It's what we grow. It's how we look after it. It's how we live in the environment there. And the brothers who are part of that community, but a much larger others who come and share their time with us as volunteers, and also some longer term community members. And that's been, I think, a real beacon of hope in the UK. In the Solomons, where I happen to be visiting at the moment, again, some simple actions, tree planting, replanting coconut palms on the seafront where storms have taken them away. And really a lot of it too engaging with Franciscans International on logging and mining issues. And we're preparing for another round of the Universal Periodic Review at present. And we do this in partnership with the Dominicans in Solomons, and also with Sisters of the Church. Sisters of the Church are one of the other Anglican religious orders here. So we try to work, in these sort of ways, and we will, one of our third order, as I said, like the secular Franciscans in our term, one of our third order will be with us at COP30, and he will be able to speak directly to, the position from the Pacific. And there will also be Anglican presence at COP30, which we will be kind of interacting with as well through the Anglican office at the UN and some other advocacy organizations as well. So that is a very kind of summary, just from a kind of very brief, very broad-based perspective. But I think a lot of local action, but also that challenge of people who are still saying, what's it all about? Or is this really important? And I think the challenge for us is getting the message across. Yes, this is important. Yes, this is the world God gives us to live in. It's our duty. It's our right to live in it as responsible partners in creation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris, and I'm glad you made it back to us.
Yes.
I think listening to all of you, what really permeates the answers is that connection with real experiences of real people, even though we might be going to a UN conference and operating in these big spaces, the importance of really connecting to the grassroots. And I think that's also we're hoping to bring to COP30 as Franciscans. Looking at the time, I did want to ask, all of you here will be in Belém during COP30. And I was wondering, as Franciscan brothers and sisters, or as somebody who's worked for justice and peace, what are your hopes for COP30, or what is your message that you're hoping to bring to COP30? Also making sure that COP30 isn't an endpoint, because of course we're working toward it, but it doesn't mean our work ends there once the conference is done. Joe, maybe I'll start with you.
Thank you. As I was listening to Renata and Chris, and also knowing a lot of the work of Rodrigo, one of my hopes is not necessarily, it is for COP, of course, but it's beyond COP. And I think one of the biggest things that we need to be aware of is indifference. Pope Francis and Pope Leo have spoken about the difficulty of indifference. Somebody earlier asked the question, well, what are the people from the North doing in response to the document that we're talking about? And I think sometimes, I don't know if people are frozen in place or what, or if they are indifferent. And I think part of what we need to do, one of my hopes is that growing out of COP, our presence at COP30, we're going to create some sort of process for our Franciscan family so that we can do things both at the local level and at the larger level. There's got to be, it's got to mesh the two places. I think we've tried to do that, and we need to maybe redouble our efforts so that the words from COP30 can turn into the actions that Chris was talking about, that Renata was talking about, and that I know Rodrigo is very involved in. So I would say for me, that is one of my big hopes for COP30, that as we come together, we can encourage one another to find ways to include other people so they're not indifferent. And sometimes the problem is so big that people just say, oh, we can't do anything, but we can. We need to show people what's being done already and how to include that in our future work.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to come in? Rodrigo?
I agree with Joe. I would And I would like to add, when Christopher and Renata spoke, they spoke from the realities, from what's happening and where we are involved. This is what I think is what we can't lose this perspective, because this is where we are grounded and give us a possibility to work for, to interact, and all this. So I think it's going to be a very important opportunity for our group that will be in Belém, in terms of sharing and thinking ahead. Rosansky, remember that we need to continue. And this is what's happening. Right now, I'm in Rome. Yesterday, we had a meeting with the Union of the Superiors, Men and Women, JPIC, to highlight this specific document. And then we had the talk with some cardinals that spoke, the presence, but they were online. But the idea is to continue. The document goes beyond COP. COP was the motivation for the document, and the document is strong enough. I think when Christopher brought the realities from the perspective where, but the part of the world where he lives, and and then also when he talks about the Franciscans, the Anglican Franciscans, etc., how are they involved? It put us on board, and it's interesting when Renata bring us the issue of the cities and the urban issue, and the people who are living in the cities and struggling, because normally when we say nature, when you say environment, climate, we think indigenous people, we think mountain, the green, the trees, etc. No, we are within, we are part of it. And the challenges are, and the majority, and some regions, the majority of people are living in urban areas. So it has to do with us. And just to highlight one issue, this is one of the subjects that the People Summit, it's taking into consideration the urban challenges and what they call alive peripheries. It means, how are we going to make this change, this transformation? We need to replan our style of life, and cities are on the stake.
Thank you. Renata, Charity, Chris, you want to comment?
Just, I think, to say that one of the things I think we do have is that resource of being Franciscans, which means we are connected together in various ways, and we are part of a wonderful network. And let's, use the strength of that network, not only in what we're bringing into COP30, but what we take from COP30 to continue the work, to use all of our Franciscan network, and that fraternitas that is such a key value for us.
Yes, I was going to go on the same direction, Chris, to say COP30 is not an end for us, or a place where we should get solutions, because we're struggling every day, and the struggle continues regardless of the solutions and the conversations and debates on COP30. So I think the part of the work, of course, we are there together with the same ideals to try to create these joint and common solutions, but part of the work will continue. I think we should see as this moment as a place to think of common solutions, to make sure our voices are heard, considered, but continue our work that we do every day. And it makes me happy to think that everyone is kind of aligned here in the same kind of thinking and feeling. So at least we have a group of people fighting more strongly there.
Thank you. Sister Charity, can I give you the last word?
Thank you, Thomas. Yes, I'm happy that the Episcopal conferences of the Global South have come up with this document. And I just hope that the COP30 is going to be something that is even going to unite them more and to speak louder. Because sometimes the tendency is to give in to what the so-called investors come up with and forget about the crisis that is there on the ground. So I just hope that there'll be more unity and that anything that is going to come up from COP positive enough will be taken and spread and even not be the end as everyone else has said, but be the starting point, the diving board of even doing more, spreading the word more to the grassroots.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's, looking at the time, I think that's a very good note to leave it for today. Even though this is the last webinar of this series, as we said, it doesn't mean that we're done. We'll again be hosting live conversations from COP30 in early November. And we also plan to organize another webinar after the conference to take stock of exactly what happened and how we go from there. If you would like to stay informed about our work and these events, we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter at franciscansinternational.org. And we've also created a WhatsApp group that will be in the chat right now. And here we'll try to share daily updates from COP30, as well as any upcoming events or events that you can join remotely. If you're interested in joining that group, simply click on the link in the chat. You'll also receive all of this information by email after the webinar. So for now, I would like to thank all our speakers today for sharing their insights and their contributions. There are also two unsung heroes that you might not have seen, but you might have heard. And these are Brother Pepe and our former intern, Julia, who graciously offered to help out with the interpretation. So a big thank you to them as well. And finally, thank you all again for being here today. We'll hope that you continue with us on this journey as we work together to preserve and protect our common home. So thank you, have a great day, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.